I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is how I know how to line them up.
What?
So this cut lets me know how all the files should line up.
I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
So انت شي مرة شفت قبل الفيلم where they do this
clip.
That is to match all the cameras and the audio together.
Why does it?
So otherwise you'd be talking and the video would be something else. And this camera is filming me.
Yes.
It could be filming the wrong time that I'm talking.
Okay.
So that's how it all lines up.
That's fine. You don't need to explain. Just by clapping your hands, it aligns. It does something to the. What are you talking about?
It gives me a line on the audio and the video.
When you re-edit the.
When I look at the file, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I can then see.
Yeah.
Otherwise, بدها شي 6 ساعات يمكن عم تفتش وين exactly.
Okay.
Heidi, this is like 10 minutes.
Okay.
That's the only thing.
It's a trick?
It is. Hey, it's a trick that's 100 years old.
Yeah, okay. It's news to me. It's news to me.
بالمتصرفية.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
It was in their constitution.
We'll talk about it.
Of course. That's why we're here. This podcast is made possible by the generosity of listeners and viewers like you. Kindly consider a contribution through Patreon or PayPal. Links are in the details box. Any amount is appreciated. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle, the Beirut Banyan. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And to stay updated with video releases, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. I'm Rani Shatar, and this is the Beirut Banyan. The city is so small that I don't need to reach out to people that I want to speak with, because I can simply go out with a friend to Mono, have a late dinner, and meet everyone that I'm trying to speak with. And it was a very natural occasion where someone we both know shouted my name, brought me over. We had a bit of an exchange, a fun exchange, and you were at the table. And I saw you, and I decided to maybe poke at you a bit, and you poked back, and we had a pleasant exchange for about 15 minutes, I think. And very quickly we decided that we should do this. And I think you're one of the few guests that I can think of who has a very, very opinionated position, and is honest about it too, and is somewhat, I'll be polite here, somewhat controversial, not in your topic, not in your, not even in your research. It's maybe the way you deliver your message. I'll say this very diplomatically. I've seen you on Twitter, and I'm going to quote, there we go, that's it. We're perfect introduction to the episode. It's like even he's upset.
Can I cut you, or like I should?
Cut me anytime you want. Okay. Yeah, anytime you want.
No, I don't want.
No.
I'm just listening.
No, I'd like to introduce you this way. So on Twitter, the way I knew you was every time I'd post something, you'd appear out of nowhere and say, wrong analysis. I think this was maybe 10 or 15 times from like, okay, this guy has a problem. Wrong analysis. Good morning, wrong analysis. Good evening, wrong analysis. There is something else. In person, you say things that I think you believe in, but your delivery is a bit extreme. So I was just mentioning a topic and you look at me and you say, sovereignty is crap. Word for word. I'm like, okay, we have to talk. I think on WhatsApp, even when I asked you to send me photos, you were funny about it. You're like, what kind of photo exactly do you want? I'm like, what do you think? Just your face? You're almost Do I want? I don't want to see anything else. Just your face. I'm not going to put anything else. And then add to that, there's a bit of comic character and a very in-depth website where there's a lot of constitution, a lot of research, a lot of indexing. It's definitely something you're passionate about. So I think if I understand you right, you're a bit of a raconteur. You like to provoke, but it's the meaning and the messaging behind that really matters to you. So I want to start here. Iyad Boustany, why do you think this is the way to deliver your message? We're going to get into federalism. We're going to talk only about federalism. But before that, I want to know just a bit about you. You're on Twitter. You're notorious for your tweets. You're increasingly on TV. And I think, I said this in person, I think when you're on TV, it's more you. It's more, I think it's a better characterization of you because the tweets, you're hiding behind this username Dawn, although we know it's you. And I think in person, you're a lovely human being. I could spend...
thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No,
I'm humbled by you saying that. But that's what I would genuinely want to be perceived as. We're living at a time, and I'm that where we think that intellectual rigor sort of reflects as fascistic or extreme, or whereas it's only intellectual rigor, maybe flawed, but rigorous, analytical. So by addressing matters that are more like on social sciences that involve human beings, that are not mathematics, and trying to be rigorous about it, puts a person in a position where it sort of is perceived as being bad or tough, or whereas it's only trying to find solution for literally for the greater good. And I genuinely believe that there's a greater good in building a successful society that live in harmony, and this is exactly what I'm trying to do at a time where most of the leading elite simply raised the white flag. They've just they've went the easy way, the easy path, the complacent path.
I think in this very delicate introduction, this is where the conversation exists. And I'm going to start it off by saying that I know you've done your research on federalism, and it's clear. The website actually has, I think it's 10 amendments or 10 proposals, 10 principles, sorry. And it's very easy to access. So I highly recommend anyone who wants to really understand where you're coming from to check out your website. And I can tell you've dedicated a lot of time and energy to this website. Let's start with an assumption, and you tell me why I'm wrong, because I know that you're going to say I'm wrong. You won't say wrong analysis here because it's a bit odd, but you say you're wrong. You have a wrong analysis.
I'm a guest. I'm a guest.
And I put something in the coffee too. No, actually. I do not think these blanket statements, and I'm being extra polite here, I'm trying to really understand. I don't think blanket statements apply to Lebanon. Forget the rest of the region, forget the rest of the world. I'm going to focus in on this country that we both care about. I don't think Islam is one and the same. I have to humbly disagree from the onset that sovereignty is crap. I think sovereignty allows the breathing space among communities. And I have to say something up front. This is where I want to get to. I think we are layered and complicated people. I don't think we're separate flavors that live side by side. And I'll offer an analogy. I feel, this is a subjective way of looking at it, I feel that even in one family, you can have a variety of ideologies. I think even among siblings, you can have identity disagreements. I think sometimes even individuals change their mind over time. And I don't think the religious component is the biggest contributing factor. It obviously plays some role, but I wouldn't like a Lebanon that sees itself as more divided along the lines that are not so meaningful. So in other words, an urban Beiruti or a Ras Beiruti to me is more interesting than a Sunni or a Protestant. A mountain Lebanese, a villager is more interesting than Maronite and Druze. A disenfranchised Lebanese that comes from either north or south, makes their way to Beirut, is more meaningful to me than Sunni or Shia. And I know this sounds maybe silly to you because you've done research on exactly the reasons why maybe what I'm saying does not match reality, but I believe it. And you tell me, is that a imagined reality to you? Is that something that's more fiction than real?
First, let me say that I'm going to say something that you might find odd. I totally agree with what you're saying. I totally agree with the fact that we, as Lebanese, I'm saying, because that word has a meaning, have a lot in common, and we have a lot in diversity. The entire thought process that inhabits me. I don't know whether you say that in English.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm translating from French in my mind.
And I'll say I had to translate some of your tweets because they're mostly in French.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I hope I got that right.
It's because I think in French and then
Yes.
I try to write either in Arabic, Lebanese, or in English.
Right.
So what I wanted to say is that we have a lot in common. And we have a lot that takes us apart. The entire thought process revolves around how to minimize friction given that reality. That's the entire federal project, is how to keep a country together in its diversity that I love, the mosaic, and people laugh at me because of the colors and whatever of that map.
No, that map is actually...
that map is how beautiful our country is. This is exactly what I want to say. This map, with its patchwork and the fact that it's a mosaic, is exactly what we need to preserve and develop, rather than have one block of that color versus one block of that color and one block of that color next to one block of that color. Right? So the driver behind it, at least I hope people would give me that credit, and I don't care what they think of the content, but of a good faith uniter rather than anything else. And if people give me that credit, I'm fine. Whatever they think of the rest, I don't really care.
I appreciate this perspective. So you're trying to preserve diversity in a more assertive political way that's unfamiliar to the Lebanese experience, to the modern Lebanese experience. And we're going to get into that because we said this a bit before, but the constitution that has been elaborated is really based on Mutasarrifyate, and I hope I remember this right, it's the Swiss historic experience, not necessarily Correct. Switzerland right now,
Correct.
but Switzerland in time.
Correct.
So it's not that this is, it's in our DNA, it exists, it's not that long ago, but I'm going to throw a caveat here. You're 49, you mentioned before, and you look great for 49. I look terrible for 40.
Not true.
Because I hide this part of me. They don't see it. It's pretty bad. And you reminded me I need to exercise. Neither one of us is old enough to know what Lebanon was like in the 50s and 60s.
Correct.
You probably have a little bit of memory before the Civil War, but
No,
zero.
not at all.
Zero. Okay, so you were, what, 3 or 4 years old when the war broke out?
Exact.
We don't know what a functioning Lebanon looked like.
Correct.
And if it was not functioning, we don't know what a semi-functional Lebanon looked like. But I am certain that in those 2 decades, we were finding a way to reform the end goal, which is what you talk about, preserving our plurality. And I think what allowed us to move in that direction was something that you dismiss, which is sovereignty. Now let's start there, because I want to get to federalism. I want to focus on federalism, but I need to ask this before. Why are you, I wouldn't say anti-sovereignty, because I don't know if that's true, but why do you dismiss it so easily in the Lebanese context? And do you think the 1950s and 60s was a failed experiment? Because I don't. I really think 1970 is when Lebanon falls apart, not 1960 or 1950. I think it's violence that drove the society to hell. So let's go here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sovereignty and the path. Just to start by where you ended. From my perspective, Lebanon was put on the path to failure in 1926. So
Really the start.
The start. So back then, it was all set. What came next was just written in history, just waiting to happen. Why? Very simple. Diversity exists all over the planet. Just people learned how to manage it. And the way you manage it is by ensuring a fundamental principle, which is called cuius regio, eius religio.
Yes, I've seen you use this. Yeah.
That's it. Once you do that, you ensure that people don't clash. Sovereignty is the byproduct of a nation. It only exists as an expression of people's willingness, envy, desire to self-rule. Okay? That's sovereignty. In a multicultural country, that expression of self-rule has multiple applications, has multiple readings to it. We don't understand self-rule the same way depending on per community. So my point is, sovereignty actually is cantonal, is national in the sense of the nation. The nation meaning the community, because in my understanding of this country, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my reading. Sect is identity, it's not faith. I don't care about religion. I don't care whether you go to mosque, church, khilwe, whatever. I don't care. Nobody cares. That's a private matter. You do whatever you want. But people, identity is a need that people have to organize, to give meanings to their lives, to organize where they're coming from and where they're heading to identify who are their heroes, who are their traitors, who are their what is permitted, what is not permitted, who's a friend, who's a foe, etc., etc. All of these, and obviously I'm talking about collective identity, which is an essential part of individual identity. So the collective identity is centered around communities, sects in Lebanon, and that is called the organic identity. My point is to bridge the gap between the organic identity that have been here around for 2,000 years for Christianity, 1,400 for Islam, 1,000 for the Druze, which is the youngest one. It has been around 900 years before Lebanon, itself. So in order to bridge that gap from
6,000 for Jews and about 100 for Armenians and whatever. I agree. I completely agree. So this is a way of preserving communities. I think from
Not,
preserving.
not only preserving communities, but to bridge the gap between, to bridge that road, that space, that distance between the organic identity and the constructed identity, which is Lebanon,
Right.
which is a geography initially,
Yeah.
but a unifying geography. We need a conveyor to take us from that to that, and I think federal system is essentially that governance system that will diffuse tensions among communities, because it will self-rule, would allow, will put me in front of my own poor performers, and I will be able to punish them, remove them of office, put them in jail, etc. Each on his own, over his own, son of a bitch, quote unquote, and therefore would allow us to put in common, to share what we have, our common heritage. When I say common heritage, it's a lot of things, and I starting with what Nassim Taleb and Pierre Zaloua demonstrated, which is genetics, meaning this country has, irrespective of sect, the same genetic pool, which means a lot, which means that we behave the same. And you feel that once you just move out of this country, all Lebanese look the same. You know, they behave the same, they look the same. You don't care anymore where.
Yeah.
But so all I'm saying, this genetic pool, this common historical behavior, we will be able to exploit it by putting it together, by sharing our experience, expertise, knowledge, and we're a super performance people, and that shows everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that, and setting aside, making each one manage what he has in person, in what we call his being, his identity.
I think that's the goal is noble, because you're finding a peaceful political way forward that makes sense to this part of the world in history. And I'm just want to understand about the brief window. Why are you dismissive of the independent Lebanon experience? I don't know why the 1940s, 50s, and 60s are unfitting for Lebanon. And it's my understanding of everything that has happened to this country that communities do not threaten each other naturally in this country. But the moment a regional war became part of day-to-day life, all of the issues that you're trying to diffuse, they rose up to the surface. So, in other words, I can't imagine a Kata'ib militia emerging without Fatah in this country. I can't imagine an Ishtirak fighter, Ishtiraki, whatever, fighting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, unless that regional war is putting people against each other.
I disagree.
And sorry, I'll say one more thing, because I want to link it up somehow to what we're going through right now. I simply don't think this is a natural evolution of sects or identity in Lebanon. I don't think Hezbollah is Shia, Fatah is Sunni, Al-Uwait is Maronite, and so on. Tashnak is Armenian. I think that's what political violence can do to any society, whether it's Lebanon or anywhere. I don't think this is us. I think it's the perverted version of us that happened in the 70s, and we're still in that.
But it happened in the 70s, it happened in the 20s, it happened in the it happens in 1860, it happens. Look, we're confronted to a clash of civilizations. That's the reality. That's we can hide from it, we can whatever, we can say it doesn't exist, we can but comes a time we owe it to ourselves, our kids, our parents, our country, what we did to the mess we did to this country. We owe to stand up and tell it as it is.
You subscribe to Samuel Huntington's way of
absolutely.
But can I'm sorry to challenge you a little bit.
Yeah, of course, please.
It's my rare opportunity to do this.
It's a absolute pleasure.
I heard you say earlier that we have much more in common in this limited geography than we do different. And you said it very nicely, that you put these people outside the country, you can tell who's Lebanese right away.
Of course.
I don't know if the civilizational clash really applies to this limited space. And why every society has its violent chapters of history, but Lebanon in its modern state only existed briefly for a few decades. I don't think of those years as problematic. I actually would have loved, maybe you feel the same way, maybe not. I would have loved to experience what it was like to live here in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And I also would have, I think, been in a far more functional, far more optimistic country. Not this horrible version of it that we're in.
But wait a second. It was designed by the Maronites as a Mediterranean/European country. That's the reality of that. It didn't cater for the other with a big capital A. It didn't address the fact that the first community that 1926 and later on 1943 dismissed are the Druze. These guys are a tiny minority in this country, but they played a huge role in its history. And together with the growing demographics and cultural advancement of the Maronites, they were able to build a very strong, and I'll talk to you about it, a space within the Ottoman Empire. Okay?
Yeah.
Reality is the Maronites stabbed them in the back. Not only in 1825, and we're not going to talk about that, but in 1926 and 1943, when we signed a deal with the Sunnis against the will, if you want, and desire of the Druze. So they felt betrayed. The second who actually didn't find their place in that narrative are the Shia. They sort of lived in a country where they were considered literally second-class citizens, not by law at all, but by the mere fact that if you read the country's history, they simply don't exist. You're here because you were here when we said that the borders will be in that like this, and that's it.
Isn't that just simply the job of a country that needs to reform its institutions? And I'll throw an example. I'd like to hear your opinion on something that's been thought of for decades now, a Senate that would just preserve that insecurity, whether you're Druze, Shia, Armenian Orthodox, Armenian Catholic, whatever, and a place that these frictions can be solved. Isn't that a more constructive way of letting Lebanon evolve rather than sort of bringing it back to the Mutasarrifyate-like identity that is Lebanese? But it's a different Lebanon. It's not the modern Lebanon that I think a lot of us talk about.
Correct.
Is there anything there that can be bridged?
The way I approached it is principle based. So I don't know. It will sound funny, but I hate ideologies. Okay, because ideologies, the word,
except federalism.
Yeah, exactly. Except mine. All the rest is crap except one, which is mine.
So what exception?
No. No, but more seriously. Now you're laughing, but more seriously. The word itself it comes from Greek, and it means ideologos, the idea before the reasoning. So the preconception before you actually function your logos, your brain, your logic, and come to a conclusion. So I hate ideologies. No, just believe me for a second.
Oh, no, I think I know what you mean. Federalism is not an ideology; it's a political.
And how did I get there?
Yeah.
I starting with a clean slate, and I'm saying, okay, what are my 10 principles?
Yes. Yeah.
And where will they, if they were to apply, which constitution would they lead me to? Now, the first one is the acceptance that this country is a diverse country where you have various national narratives. And that in itself is a huge, it's a go, no go, but it's not easy to admit. It's not like it's not a shallow admission of a difference. No.
Right.
It's you need to believe that the way and I like unlike many, I have a the Ottoman Empire was a very advanced empire. The Ottoman Empire was, as a matter of fact, much more lenient, permissive, acceptant of diversity than most of European kingdoms.
So I'm going to do something, Iyad. I'm going to, for I've had the conversation on sovereignty and neutrality with Hisham Bounasif, who I think I would assume there's a disagreement perhaps between your desire to have federalism now, not later, and his take, I think, is more sovereignty and neutrality will enable a federal Lebanon later. But the end goal is federalism regardless. I'm going to ask you, if you could, the ethno-geographic federal Lebanon that you elaborate on, and we're going to get into the step-by-step. And I really think the website is fantastic.
Thank you.
For anyone that's trying to reconsider Lebanon and where things should move, you've done it very easy to use and understand. Whether you disagree with it or not is separate. But is it simply that we should draw our cantons according to the colors that you colored very efficiently and accept that there will always be something like Hezbollah in certain parts of the country and something like Fatah Islam in the north, and you will always have these insecurities and you can't do anything about it? So let Lebanese be different and screw sovereignty.
Yes, that's absolutely. That's absolutely. Wait a second. Absolutely. Yes.
Oh no.
Wait
so
a second. No. Wait a second.
Is it. Okay. Yeah.
Wait a second.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Look. Wait a second.
Sorry.
Wait a second.
Yeah. This is my nightmare scenario. It's where I'm stuck with a crowd that I'm 5% in line with, but it's the 5% that matters to me, and therefore I can feel at home with others because they're all in the same problem and they have their own reasons, and I don't like the narrowness.
But wait a second.
Yeah.
Yes, I the problem is, don't think that you should understand. I think I'm a decent guy. No, wait a second. No, I'm
no, you
saying
are.
it
You
on-
are.
And the point is, it's not easy for me to say what intellectual rigor in constructing a system has me say. It makes me say things which I, as a person, as an individual, would love to have been in a different position and say the exact opposite. But it's not possible. I mean, bear with me. We have to fight our own demons, each one. Back in the 20s, it was easy for that overwhelming group that was sort of the majority, etc., to fight everybody's fight because the elite were so alike. I mean, if you look at the elite, the Beirut elite, Sunni, mainly Orthodox, the ultra elite of the Maronites, they were very much alike, right? And the bourgeoisie was essentially Orthodox, Sunni and Orthodox, but to a certain extent, the Maronites were able, like, a bit slowly to catch up.
But they weren't alike enough. I mean, you have these two odd characters, right? Shara Khouri on the left and Riyad Salah on the right. Pardon for their interpretations. I love these guys who make these dolls.
Okay.
You know who's Riyad Salah with the tarbush, right?
Of course.
So these two characters are in jail for fighting for a common Lebanon. I don't know if they're so bourgeoisie. حدا من الصيدا وحدا من نسيت وين بشارة خوري's from I forgot which village he's from. No, they were in prison there.
Yeah.
I don't remember where. Somewhere in the mountains.
Yeah.
These two characters are not so elitist. Rishmaya. Well done. That I don't know if that's entirely true. There's Lebanese that fought for this more unitary Lebanon. You don't believe it? Yeah.
No, I think this is the well. Just tell you a
Sure.
couple of things about. First of all, most of the Maronites were against the quote-unquote independence. 1943, Patriarch Arida excommunicated Bashar al-Khoury because he accepted to put the possible Arabness of Lebanon. Emil Eddi, even Kamal Jumblat, etc., were absolutely against that. And if you look at that time, back then, it was just the Brits playing against the French that got us into independence, or whatever you want to call it. Nobody wanted that.
I don't know. The majority of Maronites, I think, were uneasy with a smaller Lebanon. And this little Lebanon idea was there, but it didn't take hold. I don't know if this is... Lebanon was born, whether it's born in error, 1926, or whether it's born through war, in World War II. But there is something that's born. And I do appreciate that you want to go back to something earlier, which is 1861. And I like that you said the Ottoman Empire was advanced, because it feels like it was more advanced than what we're living through right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's start here. Federalism and 1861, and let's go through these 10 points together. Could you say in maybe a few sentences, what exactly is federalism in Lebanon? I know federalism, the type of governance, but what is it?
Very simple.
Yeah.
Very simple. It's if you say that partition is the segregation of people, federalism is the segregation of powers.
Okay.
That's in a sentence.
That's fair. Yes.
Okay. That's
Yes.
the core message.
Yeah.
And if you want to dig a bit deeper, you say, before saying federalism, we need to, literally in a sentence, say, what is the problem of Lebanon? Why are we here? Our analysis is the following. The problem of Lebanon is twofold. One, mismanagement of diversity. Two, poor governance. Point. Now, which is the political system that actually solves these two equations? We're talking math here. No feelings, we don't care, I'm sorry, etc. Just like reality, right? There are these, assuming you agreed with me, maybe you don't, that these are the two problems that we are facing. Which political system addresses these two concerns?
You're not including political violence because you don't think that is part of the problem.
I think it's a conclusion. It's a consequence of the
I see.
rather than a reason.
You know, if I may say, I'll let you keep going. I think that's where the line is. That's where the debate exists, I think.
Explain.
That line, I think, is where everyone they're not understanding each other. You said political violence is a consequence.
Of course.
I believe that the political violence Lebanon has gone through the last 50 some years is not our system or our society. I think it's regional war in Lebanon. I think I
have a view on that, but wait a second.
Yeah.
When would you want me to touch on that? Now? Can I?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we have all the time in the world.
Okay,
yeah,
great. I totally agree with you that we are not. When I say we, I mean the Lebanese.
He agrees with you too.
Yeah, clearly. We're not violent society. I think we're too subtle for it, and I think it draws back to definitions, and I think we really think things can be massaged one way or the other, including money, including whatever you want. But that's good. I mean, violence is like the worst scenario ever anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay. Why, if you look at the past 50 years, and I totally agree with you when you said it's an imported problem, partially, but to a large extent, I agree. More specifically, it's we live in an environment that is fundamentally unstable. If you look at our main neighbor, Syria, it's a dictatorship. It is run ruthlessly by one community that is trying to preserve itself from the majority, Alawi versus Sunni.
Or even one family that's trying to fight for its own survival.
I disagree, but that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, here's where the disagreement is, okay? Now, my view...
The bravest anti-Assad critics that I've encountered in my life are Alawite, all of them. And and anyway, sorry, that's
you
another...
might be right.
Yeah,
I don't claim any truth.
Yeah.
Just... No,
It's
but only my opinion, and I...
Sure, but that's interesting where these...
I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, they are, and those society, more specifically Syria particularly, but anyway, that is anything that is not Levantine, on the shore, on the Mediterranean, Phoenician traders, etc., are more akin to violence, and more particularly, these guys are at risks for on their they are at they have this perception of an existential threat, and they hold to power the way they took over power and have been holding to it for the past 50 years, whatever, since the 70s. And the way they look at Lebanon is obviously a very interesting place for business, so they want to own it, okay, which is fair. But even more so, they look at the Sunni in Lebanon as extremely dangerous. Why? Because
That's extremely
dangerous.
Dangerous.
Because they are Lebanese, highly educated, usually bourgeois, can talk to the West, and they can destroy or they can unleash that existential threat that these guys are under. Yani they can mobilize the Syrian crowd. So what they want to do is control Lebanon, for the wealth, okay, but not really. They want to dominate the Sunni, just to make sure that the Sunni do not express or create a threat or become a threat to their own regime.
Right.
So the day the Syrians understood they were about to leave Lebanon, what they needed to do, the fate of all the Syrian Sunni elite was sealed. That's my point of view.
But that interference, I think, is, again, this is, I think, where the line is. I see that interference as turning Lebanon upside down, not so much Lebanon upside down, and then other countries get involved.
I didn't understand.
Okay, so I hope I'm saying this the right way. I think the reason everyone has this debate all the time is I think there's literally two opinions. And one opinion is that Lebanon was born incorrectly and regional problems can easily enter Lebanon. Therefore, we need to change the way Lebanon functions. There's that other opinion, which is Lebanon was born. Whether it's healthy or not, whether it's wobbling or falling or standing, it was born. Lebanese contributed to that project. Regional wars that were not Lebanese quickly became part of the Lebanese story, not by choice. I don't think Lebanon volunteered and said, we want Fatah, checkpoints, army in the south, fighting Israel. I think this happened. It's not necessarily Lebanon's fault that the Cairo Agreement threw Lebanon under the bus. I don't think that's inertia within Lebanon, even if it happened.
I disagree.
Or for that matter, I don't think Hezbollah is a natural expression.
I hear you.
Of the Shia understanding of what it means to be Lebanese. I don't think so.
That's exactly where the line of disagreement stands. I think each community, the Druze, the Christians, and within the Christians, various the Sunni and the Shia, de Gaulle used to say the nations are the soul of politics. You cannot express politics or a political opinion outside of the background of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So one French philosopher used to say, the dead govern the living. I mean, meaning your ancestors,
yeah.
your heroes,
Right.
your legacy.
Yeah.
This is what makes you who you are and how you express it. Whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not,
Yeah.
you're not in a void. You're not. It's not a vacuum. It's not me.
Yes.
Narcissically.
Yeah.
It is who I am, and I owe it to centuries of and all of us. So my point being is, these communities who actually express their unease with the centralized Lebanon dominated by the Christian, rebelled using the powers that naturally lend them there because of cultural ties, lend them, and I'm going to give you examples from Europe, lend them their strength, and I firmly believe that the Lebanese were weaponized by regional power at least as much as they themselves weaponized regional power for their own benefit.
Yes. Yeah.
Sectarian benefit.
Right.
Per community.
So somebody like Fuad Shahab, for you, would be less important than the bigger story. That he's an exception rather than what we could have. Because I see someone like him in those delicate years, late 50s to mid 60s, where Lebanon has something that can withstand those problems. It's been talked about so many times. It's almost like a cliche to say it. He could keep Arab nationalism in Syria. He didn't let Abdel Nasser cross the border. He also found a way to build institutions.
But there was war, right? I mean that ensued.
Yes, three month summer civil war. 1,500 Lebanese died, but it wasn't a 15-year civil war.
Correct.
And it ended. It didn't turn into what we have now. It ended, and the Lebanese state was still functioning. I think I like the disagreement here because I think it would be really. It's a hypothesis. It's not something you can really. I just don't think that we're so bad the way we were born.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
You know the saying, Rome was not built in a day.
Yeah.
But Rome didn't die in a day either.
That's true.
It took centuries to actually fade away and die.
Yep.
And Tirso and Carthage and Byzantium and okay.
Some think it's still around.
yeah. But it's under occupation.
Under occupation.
Occupied Constantinople. I know.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, we died in 1926. We simply didn't know it.
So you're taking that very interesting long view that goes back in time.
You know, when you die, you just like still move this here and there. You still might do good things. I mean, whatever. I mean, it took like 100 years to actually crumble.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a body. The second after it dies, it still is the same body that it was a few seconds before, right?
So let's start with the birth and the death, the birth of the Constitution of 1861, what you're trying to push forward, and the death of what you see as Lebanon. Although I love that back and forth, but let's start. The 1861 Constitution and federalism, which you described earlier, and the 10-point plan for reimagining Lebanon.
Okay. 1961.
1861.
Sorry, 1861, of course. 1861.
I thought I almost won
No.
It's like, oh my God, he's... Yes. Wrong
1861. Big time.
Yeah.
What came about is, obviously, a fight within the Ottoman Empire between essentially the Maronites and the Druze, and the window for the superpowers of the time to actually get involved in the matter of the Ottoman Empire, mine it from the inside and try to,
You're referring to the French.
Yes, the French, the Russian, the Austro-Hungarian, the German, the Prussian, the Brits.
Yes.
When they came and saw what this was all about. They analyzed the social reality of that area, and they concluded that they proposed a solution called, the title of our constitution of the time is called the Règlement Organique, meaning solution by organic nationalism. Meaning we see organically nations, different nations, and we're going to build a system that accommodates that reality. The person that drafted this, among other, but the main character is Richard von Metternich, which is the son of Willem von Metternich.
Right.
Willem von Metternich is the 19th century dominant figure, post-Napoleonian era, Congrès de Vienne. He reorganized Europe post the collapse of Napoleon. Yes. He is the person.
Yeah.
And he wrote the 1843 Constitution of Lebanon, which was a geographical federalism. قائم مقام شمال وجنوب.
This is so 1843
was a geographic federalism model in place.
But there's no real autonomous Lebanon yet. So this is semi-autonomous.
Yes,
so it's pre-Mutasarrifyate on the way to more autonomy. But this is
1840 is the collapse of Emir Bashir.
Yes,
okay.
Right. Yeah.
His son takes over, Bashir III, then converts to Islam.
Yeah.
Converts to Islam, loses the support of the Christian dominant in Mount Lebanon, revolts again, Willem von Metternich reorganizes into two geographic federalism. But in that geographic federalism,
right. Yeah.
There's a large minority in the Druze area and a large Druze minority in the Christian area.
So this is pre-everything.
And that led to the clashes and the war of 1861 because they were, and just to give you some example of how easy it was, how predictable it was. They were trying to figure out how to represent the Druze present in the Christian area and how to give representation. And they said, you know what, we're gonna build a system apart from the deputies, which are done by majority. But to give them minority, sort of an ombudsman or something like that, they said we're gonna create a wakil. There was in the constitution the wakil, but he couldn't report to the authority under which he was under because it defeats the purpose. Right. He has to represent the minorities. So they said initially, you know what, we're gonna say the wakil reports to Wilayat Beirut as a direct Ottoman Empire offshoot. Right.
You know your history yet?
I know what I'm talking about. My dad is historian, my granddad is historian, so it runs in the family.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you're a product of two generations of historians.
More. Yeah, because the family in itself is Ma'allim Boutros Boustany, obviously, you know, and later on Slimane Boustany, I have a beautiful story on Slimane. Slimane was finance minister at different points in the Ottoman Empire. He's a cousin. He's not a direct.
Not direct. Okay.
He was invited to Vienna as a foreign minister of the Ottoman Empire. So he goes to see his counterpart, and talking to the Austro-Hungarian minister, that the minister tells him, you know, I've known a Boustany, or I've heard of a Boustany who's actually translated the 20,000 verse of Iliad into Arabic. He said, oh, you heard about that? He said, yeah. Who's that person? He said, it's me. And the response of the minister was, from a translator of Homer to minister. What a decadence. And he was not talking about him. He was talking about himself as well. Yes. I mean, I highly regard you as a, but I
Right.
regard as a,
Yeah.
but this is a prominent figure. But my granddad is a historian. My granddad, he plays a role in the history I'm going to talk to you about because.
From minister to Twitter.
Yeah, here you go. Thank you. That's it. It says it all. Minister in the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah. Ottoman minister
to Twitter in Lebanon. In Mount Lebanon.
Mount
in
Lebanon.
the Canton.
Right. That's even just.
This is.
That's what I'm trying to expand. You want it even smaller.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Yeah. It's grandeur et décadence.
Yes. Right.
So no, but my the in 1926 when the United Lebanon was created, the elite of the time commissioned a book to rewrite Lebanese history to support the narrative of that new nation.
Yeah.
It was my granddad and Asad Rustum, which was an AUB professor, were tasked to jointly draft that document.
Wow.
So they submitted their draft, The History of Lebanon, in 1937. It mainly focused on definitions, and then 15th century of like and then the Imara, obviously.
Yes, right.
The Ma'an.
Where the name becomes a little more...
where the leading figure became a uniting figure of Mount Lebanon, etc., and later on Lebanon.
So I did not know that you have this passion is in the family. I did not know that.
Yeah. This is where it comes from. But it's not a trade. I'm not a historian. I have no degree. I don't possess the tools of somebody. I miss those. I mean, the ability to actually, it's a you have to go through a process in university to learn how to look at history, etc. I don't have that. It's only just reading.
But it definitely explains where the passion comes from. I did not know that I did not know you would. I did not know you grew up with that kind of very important shadow of time and meaning. I didn't know that. So sorry, I took you away from the 1861 Constitution.
Let's go back.
Let's go back. It's nice. We're going back and forth.
Okay, that's fair. So 1861. 1843 Constitution, a geographic federal constitution, led to the clashes of 1860 because of the unease in each minority, in each camp. Druze of the Matan and Maronites and Shuf, etc. Bon, it led to what it led to, and now the Richard von Metternich had to sort of devise a different solution. And by that time, you need to recall that the likes of Fichte, von Herder had the idea of a nation state had become sort of a fashionable. This is the era where the kingdoms were collapsing, but something new was coming about, which is the nation state. The fact that you have organic belonging and you needed to fit the boundaries of your new nation, the boundaries of the state to that of the nation.
Right.
So later followed by Michelet and later the famous Renan, Qu'est-ce qu'une nation? Well, everybody knows Qu'est-ce qu'une nation is his lecture at the Sorbonne, etc., etc. So
there's a nationalism in Europe. There's an Arab Renaissance, if you will, literature here.
Absolutely. So that was the flavor of that century, which was and these guys came and looked and saw different nations.
Yes.
Now they asked the Ottomans, what do you call these guys? They said millet. Milli. Millet is a word that means nations. They perceived us as nations. Not the Sunni. The Sunni were ummah. It's different. They have a different situation. They were, but all the others were big nations. Okay. So they said, okay, fine. this is how, let's organize how these nations will function. And they did an ethno-geographic federal system, which called the Mutasarrifyate, which lasted. Now, if you look at the famous book that was just published a couple of years ago by Engin Akarli.
Yes, actually, what is it called? Ottoman.
No. It's called the long piece.
The long piece.
Beautiful. I have it. It's amazing.
I did an episode with someone I'm going to guess you probably have disagreements with, Charles Hayek.
Yes.
He recommended this. We talked about this book actually.
It's a good book.
It's a fantastic book. Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
And he explains in the preface of the book that he actually, obviously, it's an Ottoman view.
Sure. No
doubt Charles liked it because it's Ottoman, but that's a different topic. But the guy says, Engin Akarli writes that he started his research in the 70s. So the guy spent the time needed to be spent before he publishes his book, right?
Yeah.
And he said, if you look at what Lebanon represents in the Ottoman Empire versus the size of the document available dealing with that topic is outrageous. I mean, how come the Ottoman Empire, the guys out there, and they have something else to do, right? Just to manage these guys.
It's a lot
very interesting.
Yeah.
So why is it that there's so much literature on that small piece of land in the Ottoman Empire where it doesn't represent even 1% of it?
Right.
And he went in, then he concludes, ultimately, that's the conclusion. Had the Ottoman Empire accepted the solutions it applied on Lebanon, meaning the ethno-geographic federalism, it would probably be today. So it would not have collapsed. It would have thrived. That's his conclusion.
The Mutasarrifyate Lebanon.
Yes, had the Ottomans replicated that model, what is it all about? It's about subsidiarity, the concept of empowering local populations, communities. That, coupled with cuius regio, eius religio. Don't forget that. Yeah. The Shihab family is a Sunni family from Quraysh. Okay, the Shihab family. When they were to govern Mount Lebanon, they converted to Christianity. Under whose blessing? The Ottoman Empire. Imagine an empire that is Sunni accepts that a royal family from Quraysh, some say even related to the Prophet, converts to Christianity to rule. That's cuius regio, eius religio. It's the reality. You want to rule, you have to be part of the population. That's it. So if you combine these two the way they did, then you could have peace. And that's why I say sovereignty is crap. Because who cares about sovereignty? I mean, we had the Ottoman Empire. Did we care? We have a saying in Mount Lebanon that goes, فلاح مكفي سلطان مخفي. What does it mean? No, don't laugh. Probably you're a bourgeois from Beirut, but I'm a mountaineer from Mount Lebanon. I'm a فلاح. I'm not nobility. Whatever.
I'm neither bourgeois or from Beirut. Although I feel like I'm
Beirut. You're a citadin, right? You're a citizen. You're a city.
I'm an
person.
urban planner,
whatever.
Who fundamentally believes in sovereignty. So hold on. Wait.
Let me finish. So all I'm saying is, what does it mean? Sultan, فلاح مكفي سلطان مخفي. It means because I have water, electricity, ability to run my life, I don't care what the Sultan in Istanbul does with Charles Quint or I don't know, Louis XIV or whoever. You know? So that's exactly what I'm saying. That's why sovereignty is a concept, is an abstract. It's a flawed idea.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to the 10 points. We need to get into them as much as you'd like to get into them, because I want to really understand the details. But I have to say it, because if I skip over it, it would be odd. I have to both stubbornly disagree and also stand up for something that I fundamentally believe in. Now, the sovereignty experience in Lebanon has not worked, for sure. Sovereign Lebanon collapsed. We don't know it because we grew up in a non-sovereign Lebanon. And I think we've spent our whole life in this country from 9 years apart in a country without sovereignty. We don't have it. We have a shadow of it. There is a state with a flag. There's a passport. There's something that is called Lebanon. It's not very impressive. It doesn't reform. It doesn't function. And it's, we've gone, over an hour. Electricity cut out maybe once with a lightning strike. That's actually not bad. That's how bad the situation is. So I'll take it as far as I can and try to bring it back. I think full control over the state and its most important aspects is a necessity. It cannot be the role of subsidiary provinces or cantons. I do not believe in a South Lebanon that is Hezbollah dominated and a North Lebanon that is Turkish, fundamentalist, Daesh, whatever you want to call it, Takfiri, infiltrated, and a Mount Lebanon that is hiding for its safety, and a Shuf that is also equally anxious. That's not the Lebanon that I want. And I don't think that is the natural evolution of this country.
Wait a second. There's a distinction that you just made, which is true in political science, which is called the legal state versus the true state. Or the legal country versus true country. Legal country is exactly what you refer to, the flag, the UN seat.
The currency that doesn't worth anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The real country, pays réel,
yeah.
Is an even more important concept in political science and political analysis. I don't know about political science. And once where we disagree is where that legal country is. What is
right.
it composed of? What is it? So my view is that it is composed of various nations. Your view is that there's a citizen and the state. This is where we...
Yes, exactly. And within that relationship, there is vibrant diversity that cannot be dismissed, and it's real. In other words, there's no point in trying to homogenize this country. You would throw it away if you did that. It wouldn't be Lebanon. But those differences don't intrude on having what looks to be like just a normal country that does not let conflict into its borders. I think that is that is where the line is always. I like the way you laid it out, imagined and real, or legal versus reality.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the goals are the same.
So in Switzerland, not so long ago, one of the cantons was reported actually to the Kingdom of Prussia. Where is sovereignty in that? I mean,
it's sovereignty and neutrality. That's the story of Switzerland.
Yeah, but wait a second.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that no. You just need to pushing the envelope. All I'm saying is you need to let people be express who they are, good or bad. We each have our own demons. We each have our own demons. We have to fight them. We have to, and I think our demons will fade away once we apply self-rule. Meaning, once that shade will have to will cease feeling threatened, not by Israel. Trust me, from my point of view. Israel is a weaponization. I think they're threatened by the Sunni. That's my take on it. But what do I know? So
I think they're threatened by Iran. That's also the interesting difference. Yeah, I
Why?
think
Explain.
it's a community that is held hostage.
Okay.
I don't think Shia are expressing themselves. I think it's a community that has a problem that is not theirs. This is also where the line is again. I don't think Shia are trying to, they're not living within demons like Hezbollah. I think they're suffocating and they're forced.
Okay. But who can? It's up to them to rebel, and we need to give them, to empower them to do so.
So this is not a shared responsibility.
Absolutely, it is not. I mean, because if it becomes a shared responsibility, how will it will turn into sectarian infighting? I mean, I cannot go and reform Shia dogma. Who am I? How do I? This is called ethnocentrism. You know what ethnocentrism is?
You're right. You can't reform. None of us can reform dogma, but we can also collectively prevent regional war in Lebanon. I think we can do that. I don't think that's not.
But there's a fine line there. There's a fine line there, which is soft power, cultural dominance.
Hezbollah's security in Dahi and in the south, their weapons, I think, are more important than Shia insecurity or dogma.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's up to the Shia to say so, not up to me. This is
It's
exactly what federalism allows
Right.
them to do.
So it's not up to us, it's up to them.
Absolutely.
I don't like that narrowed down version of this country. It makes me feel like they're not, like we're more different than I believe. That they are threatened by Hezbollah differently than I am, therefore it's their burden. I think they're suffering as much as me.
You think, but you don't know. It's whether they are or they are not. Who am I to say so? It's their burden. They need to bear to make now there's a fundamental also difference is the states that succeed are those where the various components or citizens or whatever you want to call them understand or are empowered to actually design the rules under which they govern themselves. Okay, now if I don't allow them or if I don't give them that ability to design the system under which they want to live and suffer the consequences thereof, how will they change? I mean, it's a license to keep it the way it is, of course.
Let's go down your road. Federalism solves these problems long term. Let's go into the steps, the 10 steps, and why the Mutasarrifyate model is the right one. So I'm going to let you, on your terms, say as much as you'd like. We talked just a little bit about the first principle. You brought it up earlier, national narratives. And I think that cannot be discounted in any way possible. There are layered identities. There is threads throughout the region that cannot be dismissed. But is there anything you'd like to add on that point when it comes to subsidiaries and governance?
Just to say one thing, again and again and again, sect is identity, and that has a deep rooted meaning into what is self-rule and how do you ensure that accountability systems are not hijacked by sectarian instincts. The only way to do so is to ensure that ruler and ruled are of the same faith. By doing so, you ensure that I can freely hold people accountable for their doing and their wrongdoing, and not be labeled as sectarian, and not give them that shield of their community. So that's the corner principle that has designed. Where is it coming from? Bear with just a second.
Yeah, of course.
In the 16th century Europe, Protestantism broke and challenged Catholic faith.
Yes.
And it was up until then, Europe was governed under what is called Respublica Christiana, which was theorized by Saint Thomas d'Aquin. It's like one kingdom, and with various chieftains here and there, big and small, etc. Now, it was the first time diversity was a religious reality in the quote unquote Respublica Christiana. They didn't know about diversity. Anything that was not Catholic was carved out, literally. And in that sense, even including Jews and Islam and Spain, etc. In that sense, the Muslim world was much more permissive because it didn't give political power to minorities, but it welcomed them.
Right.
This is where the Jews went, etc.
Yes.
So very interesting state of openness to diversity at the time. There was no diversity possible in that Christian realm of the time. Now, there were two religions. And there was this, what is called the German Civil War, the whole Empire Civil War that goes from Belgium down to Italy and from Eastern France to Austria. Every single village was on fire. It was like, because the Protestant faith had become widespread. In 1555 in Augsburg, a fundamental event took place where they gathered all the representative of the various princes and kings and including the Catholic Church, and they needed to come up with a solution. They needed to come up with a solution which they were facing, and that was at a village level, right? There was no geography, it was all over the place. And they came up with that fundamental principle, cuius regio, eius religio. And that enabled what is called the Westphalia Peace, 1648, which designed the borders of modern Europe as we know it, obviously plus or minus, and led to exactly the Europe that we know and why it is designed and carved out the way it is. That those lines that go from that village to this village and that village to this village, it's because of religion, not anything else. And where there was single religion, then they moved to ethnicity or language, etc. So the point is, this is where this is coming from. And we've known this firsthand when Sunni nobility that was managing or ambition to rule Mount Lebanon had to convert to Christianity in the Ottoman Empire. They were not under a different empire, they were not under Christian domination.
So it's really like looking at Samuel Huntington's research with Bernard Lewis's history and looking at nationalism as the driving force of modern history and re-examining Ottoman minorities as nations and letting them self-determine their fate. It's I think that's understood
Okay, so that's for principle number one.
Yeah, but that also in a way nicely fits into principle number two on self-government, because you use that European example, and it also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it also touches on localism and subsidiarism number three.
Absolutely.
So in a way, those are the three, and they may be the most important parts of it, but also of how you're looking at the problem.
Absolutely.
More than anything. If I could find a right way to say this one day, I'll say it somehow, that is where people don't see eye to eye. I think that is it. People look at, it's that old debate between Bernard Lewis and Edward Said. It's that old debate between...
I don't know it. Is it documented in some...
Edward Said wrote Orientalism, which has been... Exactly. I assumed, and Bernard Lewis wrote a very, very important Ottoman history book, and also a more recent book on what went wrong, which was the fate of the Ottoman Empire and Islamic history. I can give it to you. I have it here.
I'll just give it. I'll take the name.
Sure,
because
I have both.
I hate. I want my books, and I don't lend books. So
I'm sure it's available.
I'm sure.
If you can't find it, I'll give you this version. But it's the same thing with Huntington, and maybe even others that would discount that way of looking at it. So that I think these 3 points: national narrative, self-government, and localism. I think that's where the friction is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's if you don't mind, let's jump from there to point 4, which I thought was interesting: solidarity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you say as much as you'd like on that section? I don't want to speak.
This is a you cannot accept subsidiarity localism without without solidarity, because one without the other is a how to say it, empowering people to actually manage their own lives, but not burdening them with the obligation to cater for others becomes selfishness, and putting solidarity without the ability for people to cater for their own lives, to be in control of their own destiny, is called in French assistanat. It's a support system. It's a communism, ultimately, where you force on. So one and the other go hand in hand, and this derives from fundamentally, I know it's very specific, this is the social doctrine of the Catholic Church, where solidarity is a key pillar that you cannot thrive on your own. It is morally reprehensible for you to actually thrive on your own. You need to engage, and that is fundamental, and it's a corollary to power. If I give you power, it's not for you to become rich on your own. It's actually to share that wealth. So I'm not going to give you subsidiarity without solidarity.
So this is sectarian socialism.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This is like so funny. It's nice to hear it the way you're describing it, because you've got this very astute historical lens, and I'm sorry, the laughter is actually not meant to be condescending.
No, it's not taken.
It's that I see it exactly. I now understand where you're coming from. You're recreating the autonomous experience and making it something that could work again. But I see it now. I see where you're coming from.
But wait a second. When I say solidarity, it has no sectarian boundaries at all. I'm saying at the municipal. I'm talking politics here, not individuals.
Yes. Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, for instance, let's say you're a successful municipality, because as you've seen later, the smallest political unit is municipality. We're talking about these.
Right.
Now these are empowered.
Yes.
The question is, should they thrive on their own because of subsidiarity, or are they morally obligated to share their wealth to thrive collectively with their environment?
Right.
What is this, their environment? In the case of Lebanon, it's that mosaic that I'm talking about. So just to give you a very simple example, Deir al-Amar has, my hometown, has very nice historical heritage.
It's my favorite town in this country.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. There's nothing like it.
It's beautiful. I have some anecdote for you later on.
You come up, we chop off your balls. The old. That's further south.
Absolutely. That's
same mountain, different village.
Exactly, different village. Not so far away.
We have women. We take balls.
So. It's
called exchange.
The
clash of civilizations.
You said it. It's exactly. This is an expression of the beauty. The beauty of diversity.
That's the beauty. That was an expression. That was a lovely exchange. Yes.
So
we all celebrated Lebanon that day. Sorry.
Please, let's get serious.
Yes.
Okay. So Deir al-Amar, has its monuments and other there's that number of tourists that visited on summer or over summer, whatever. But suddenly these guys realize that neighboring town, let's say Banyan, beautiful city as well, beautiful palaces, etc. But for whatever reason, and it's not the case, but for whatever reason they are abandoned. Some of them are actually beautiful palaces, but they are the best interest of the guys here is to say, you know what, our tourists come and spend the day and then leave. We want to get them to come and spend 2 days or 3 days. But what do we have to offer?
Right.
On our own, we have this, whatever, but it's not enough.
Right.
So we need to team up with our neighbor. So if our neighbor cannot, on his own, by his own taxes, bring up to level those historical monuments, that we have to help him. It's our best interest anyway.
So with these municipalities that share responsibility, does that fit into the next principle, which was sovereignty? Canton sovereignty. Sorry, is that
no,
part of it? No,
it has
unrelated.
nothing to do.
Unrelated.
Totally unrelated.
Okay.
Cantonal sovereignty is a totally different concept that is related to the national narrative.
Oh, I see. So it's not that municipalities collectively within one canton.
No, municipalities are pushed to collaborate cross-cantonal. Why? Because infrastructure is cut in two, mainly.
So Ba'lin and Del Amar are not in the same canton.
No.
But there's shared responsibility among municipalities.
Absolutely, because they have a shared interest
Right.
on mostly everything, what is called the hard infrastructure.
Yeah.
Roads.
Yes.
Same roads leads to both towns.
Yeah.
Internet. Electricity.
May I ask though, if that's I actually subscribe to this. I think this local
Empowerment.
whatever, this bottom up way of rethinking problems is very attractive. But is it so difficult to have these two relatively close towns in the same canton? Is it strictly a problem of sect? That
Yes.
Ba'lin
Yes.
cannot be in the same canton.
Yes, for a reason, very simple reason.
Yeah. One is Christian, one is Druze. That's really it. I mean, that's that.
No. Identity, not religion. Meaning, do you wear scarf in public spaces or not? Do you shut down on Friday or on Sunday? What do you teach your kids? I'm going to give you a key figure. Fakhreddin. Fakhreddin is, and that's my grandpa's legacy. Not only did he write many books, and my dad as well, on Fakhreddin, but is also the founding father, if you want, of that country, right? It's a Druze. Well, the Maronites and the Druze don't share the same view on Fakhreddin.
That's true.
For us, Fakhreddin is the founder of Lebanon. For the Druze, Fakhreddin is the emir of the Druze. Nothing to do with Lebanon.
But there is enough common space for that to work, because I don't think they discount him in any way.
No, of course not.
Right.
His
But
values.
He's valued in a way. No, sorry. Let me say this again. I don't think the Christian or whatever, the non-Druze, Fakhreddin is not the most important person in history, but he's one of the founding fathers of modern Lebanon.
Of course.
I think all communities, all sects, I think agree to that. And that's enough.
Yes.
Yeah, that's enough for it to work. The Druze can feel more attached to him. They can make him...
No, they're saying it's a different figure. What they say is the one that is in Yerzy on the horse with his...
Yes,
this is the Maronites, which is partly true, construct of Fakhreddin. They say, and maybe they're right, that Fakhreddin didn't have Lebanon in mind. He had, and I think that makes sense, the Druze in mind when he dominated that region. He needed the Christians because of demographics and because of education and whatever, and because of labor. I mean, my name is Boustany. I'm a Fallah, right? My grandpa is a Fallah. We came to Deir al-Amar because it was the capital city, like the
Yeah.
way now
Yes.
people
Yeah.
come to Beirut.
Yeah.
Where did we come from? Barasha. Barasha is a small town, 10 minutes off Sharri.
Yeah.
Okay, so all I'm saying is the Fakhruddin is a great figure. He's a brilliant commander. He's a leader. But he had in mind his kingdom.
That's
Nothing was called Lebanon.
You're right. And the Ottomans killed him because he was becoming a little more than a Druze king.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's both are true.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
No, but I mean, does that interfere with why Ba'alin and Deir al-Amr should be in the same? Yeah.
Yes, it's called soft infrastructure. I'll give you another example. We want to teach our kids that, say, the first Sherbil.
The Sherbil.
No, the first Sherbil. Who is the first Sherbil precisely?
Yeah.
Okay. Back in 107.
This is yes.
In
Syria.
In Urfa.
Yeah.
Edessa, Turkey today.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
There was a high priest. At the time of the Roman Empire, the emperor was Pontifex, was the highest priest,
Right.
the Pope.
Yes.
Then when Christianity came, the emperor ceased becoming the Pope and handed over the Pontifex, the Pope, the papal, the spiritual, to the Pope.
Yeah.
But before that, it was the same. His representative, the leading figure of Edessa, was a high priest called Sherbil. This guy, a pagan, converted. Okay? Sherbil converted to Christianity. Trajan, the emperor, was furious that a high priest in his key city, which was Edessa, converted to Christianity, chopped his head. Let's assume that I want to put that, not me personally, but collectively, we decide that it should be in a manual, the school's manuals to teach the kids. Why would Druze, Sunni, Shia be involved in that decision? It's nobody's decision to make. Sorry, excuse me. I have the right to exist. I have the right to perpetuate my history.
It is a hard thing to have any national narrative in this country that supersedes everyone. It may even be impossible. But I still don't know why that should get in the way of having two villages or two towns that can naturally fit together separate.
What do you mean separate? Their power is subsidiarity, gives the entire power to do whatever they want to put together what they have in common and to separate what separates them naturally.
Let me throw it differently. Zurich and Lugano, just loosely using this example, Switzerland, I think are vastly different experiences through time than Deir al-Amr and
Ba'alin?
Yeah, I think. I could be wrong. But that's my assumption, that German and Italian histories in Switzerland, and whether it's language or whether it's whatever, those national feelings and identities are far more profound than the Druze and the Maronites of neighboring villages. I somehow believe that. And
because you, for two reasons. Because you're a highly cosmopolitan person.
And a stupid idiot.
No. And you look at matters from afar.
That's true. Yeah.
It's
more like
I'm gonna give you examples about Switzerland. Bern is a canton in Switzerland, obviously.
It's the capital.
The capital,
right,
and it's Canton de Bern.
Yeah.
Part of it was the Jura.
Okay.
Now the Jura Bern is 90% Protestant, and the Jura is Catholic mainly, but some part of it. They spent 4 centuries fighting the Protestants until in 1975 there was almost a civil war in Switzerland, You just Google it. Death, bombs, etc. For almost a year. The authorities decided that look, guys, you cease your activity, your hostile activity, and in 4 years, 1979, you're going to have a referendum where you will choose whether you want to separate from Bern or remain. 1979 comes the referendum date, and the Catholics in the Jura decide to have their own canton, and the other part of Jura stay with the other part of Jura, the Protestant part, stay with Bern. They decided, okay. Remains a town which was undecided. It was called Moutier. Moutier is the Swiss Belfast, they call it. Okay, it's almost 50-50. So they said, okay, you know what? We're gonna put 40 years we're on the referendum. Until then, it's managed separately. We're gonna etc. In 2017, they ran the referendum on Moutier, in the town of Moutier, the same town. 2017. 4 or 5 years ago, in Switzerland, 99% of the Catholics vote to go with the Jura, and 99% of the Protestants vote to go with Bern. And the debate was, what the heck? How come religion is the dominant decision-making factor in Switzerland in 2017?
I understand that.
Same town.
Yeah.
It's not like two neighboring towns. It's the same freaking town.
So in other words, these differences are simply immutable. They cannot be erased, no matter how much time passes. These are permanent differences, no matter how small or how little at times they feel they matter. I'll accept this, that we should respect those types of differences. But within the federalism sphere, there's a principle that I wanted you to maybe elaborate on a little more. I understood that both structure and governance, this is part 6 and 7, principle 6 and 7, you're in a way applying what feels familiar to me when I lived in the US, which is multiple layers of authority, and they don't all share the same responsibility. The federal sphere, the state, the city, the county, whether in Lebanon it's the municipality, the canton, and whatever. Is this just simply a sharing responsibilities in a way that it doesn't infringe on sectarian identity and lets administration function properly? Is this just trying to clean up the mess?
No, its purpose is to do what is called a decoupling framework, whereby we're handing over to the federal government what the federal government needs to be entrusted with, meaning mainly foreign policy, defense, and issuing paper money or money.
Right.
So these are sort of the regalian, the federal powers.
And limited, I assume.
Yeah, they're limited. But the beauty of it is that since the way it's constructed is the following: the municipalities would each vote to which canton it belongs, and once it does, this creates the geography that is colored by those various colors that everybody mocks. And
I'm including them in the episode. I'm actually going to have it embedded so people can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have a second layer, which is the cantonal, and then you have the 4 parliaments, because if you have 4 cantons, you have 4 parliaments, 4 prime ministers, and 4 governments. And these 4 prime ministers, they meet and form the presidential council or the federal government, and it's all by rotation.
So this is really like Switzerland.
Yes.
I think that is the Swiss model.
It is.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So they share at the top, so they can be president of the federation, and it's rotative, 1 per year. Now, but what the decisions that need to be made at federal level require unanimity. So everybody knows that he has a veto power, that he can block. So whenever we disagree on a matter at sovereign level,
Yes.
usually it's a no decision because somebody is blocking if there's a disagreement. But more importantly, your quality of internet is not hindered because the other guy had a great tender for internet, but because you didn't side with him on the sovereign cosmic issue, then he's going to block the tender that to actually improve on the internet at your grandma's village. So that's the decoupling theory, whereby everything that is below is managed below. That's its subsidiarity. Everything is managed at the nearest to the concerned parties. So in Belgium, for instance, or in Switzerland, you can stay years without a federal government.
That's true.
And
it functions.
It works.
There's sometimes a joke that they have the longest stretch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without, but I mean, Belgium is doing fine.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
It's the federal government that's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
فلاح مكفي سلطان مخفي. Who cares? Who cares? So we disagree whether we're going to invade Russia or no, go and invade Latin America. Okay, let's disagree on that global cosmic strategy, or maybe go to Mars, or no, don't go to Mars. There's another. Okay, yeah, let them disagree. But what I want the internet. I want sewage system. I want a decent life. I want freedom. I want quality education. This is what I want.
I'm going to interrupt one point here before we get into the last few principles. The reason I think Switzerland is a success story is because they were able to preserve their form of government or their form of power sharing during the world's worst wars. And I think it's what they did is really what's important, not their differences and how they preserved them. It's how they collectively said no.
Yes.
Does that resonate with you
Absolutely.
at all?
I totally agree.
So neutrality is not something that you would equally say as crap.
No, it is, but I'm not a dogmatic.
Okay.
Except for what I believe in, but
sure.
for
That's the definition of dogmatic.
exactly. I'm not a dogmatic, meaning I don't come to neutrality by dogma as a principle.
Yeah.
I'm saying the construct, the way it's designed, the mechanics of the federal system will result in neutrality de facto, not de jure. De facto, because if you disagree, you cannot decide. So guess what? You're going to be neutral.
Yeah.
Let's attack Saudi Arabia. Somebody's going to say, no, you know what? No. Okay. Let's go and invade Iran. Somebody's going to say, you know what? Not this time. Let's go and kill the Pope. No, we don't want to do that.
That's a very aggressive Lebanon.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, over ambitious.
But it's a natural neutrality as opposed to a state policy.
Anyway, that's a chimera, a dream. You simply cannot.
But it's what we had.
Anyone with his right mind think that we're gonna convince. If you want the jury neutrality, you need to convince the UN, and then you need to have your neighbors sign. Are our neighbors gonna sign to our neutrality? Ain't gonna happen. Come on.
No, but what we had what feels like a neutral phase. It's small, it's short. The 1967 war that destroyed every country did not destroy Lebanon. There's not one bullet.
Yeah.
I think that is something that we prevented from entering our border.
But wait a second. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why mainly the Sunni were so angry about Lebanon's position during that war, and they favored a very aggressive presence of the Palestinians, precisely because they felt that Lebanon didn't stand up to their expectations in terms of that bond and that aggression that they felt Israel had made.
That's true. You're right. But there are 3 years where that expression was not violent.
Correct.
Yeah, and 1970, Lebanon doesn't sign the Cairo Agreement wanting to enter hell. I think that's something that I appreciate. I appreciate any mode of governance that solves our problems, but I don't want to discount what did work in recent history as well. I think that's also something that I hesitate with often, which is throwing away the whole experiment of modern Lebanon. I do think that there are noble attempts.
Yes.
And I would rather build on those rather than, turn off the engine completely.
Hell is paved with good intentions, right?
You've got all the right sayings.
No, but this is it was the path. What matters is the path.
Yeah.
Whether the intentions were good.
Or the experiment.
It was a great country. It was an amazing country. Don't you think I love it the way it was? And I look at those pictures and I listen to my dad talking about those years.
Yeah.
My dad is a university teacher. Okay, he used to tell me, and he still tells me, that he lived as a teacher, like a king.
Yeah.
He had the same pay as as a president of the republic. They have the same grade and the same pay in the Lebanese payroll system, public system. He used to travel every year with his university teacher's pay.
Yeah.
It's a great experience. I mean, I love that country. I weep when I see those pictures. But in reality, it was the road to serfdom. It was hell waiting to happen because we haven't dealt with the fundamental issues. We just put them under the carpet.
I appreciate this way of looking at it. I like this exchange, really. I actually like that these two roads are kind of a little closer than they seem sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they're in a way not so parallel. They do converge at points too.
Well, they converge. Go ahead.
No. I like going down this road with you. I will take it back to principle. We talked about principle 6. Let's talk about principle 7, governance. All federal authorities, including federal government, are modeled on the basis of a governing council. And I think that's what you referred to as the Switzerland model.
Yeah, the unanimous
rotation. Direct democracy.
That's huge. This is key.
Yeah.
Okay. In our jargon, when we current political expressions, we have we use the same word to say vote and elect. Okay, صوت وانتخب is the same word. It means the same thing in our political life.
Yes.
What I'm proposing is that these two concepts, and obviously I didn't invent anything, mean two totally different things. Electing is when you elect your township, your MPs or whomever. Yeah. Voting is when you vote on projects passed or is a referendum at municipal, cantonal or federal level. So the point is, let's say I've elected a mayor and his team and I'm very happy with their performance. Yeah. But these guys suddenly they want the metro line to go next to my home.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy with this.
Yeah.
So I gather enough signatures and 15% of the electoral body, and I go and put that specific project, next Monday on a referendum vote. If they get 51%, so be it. If they don't get 51%, irrespective of the municipality decision, it's cancelled. It's gone. It's over.
Interesting. So this is really like a...
It's a check and balance.
Yeah, right.
You keep them in a leash, I don't know how to say it in English, but you breathe over their necks. You're happy with their performance, but this project I don't like.
Right.
So let's say they're doing great, but they wanna ban alcohol. Wait a second. You wanna ban alcohol? You're doing a great job as a team. But that topic, let's have it on a if 51% go for it, then okay, fine.
Ask you yet in Lebanon recent history, have we had one referendum?
No,
never. In the whole independent Lebanon, did we ever have any referendum?
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist here.
No.
Yeah. That's interesting too, that you would want to have at least local referendums in a country. Yeah.
It's powerful.
Forget federal. I mean, just have.
But just note that even
Yeah.
France doesn't have this. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's a very dairy proposition.
Yes, yeah.
In France, it's just and it's by popular initiative.
Right.
So you as a citizen trigger it.
But
rather than
yeah.
the authority
Yes,
calls
it's
for
popular
it.
will.
Yeah.
But in a way, this does make sense. You take any example of a country that has some form of provincial autonomy or even parliament. The United Kingdom is famous for its referendums.
Of course.
I was in Scotland when they voted on two things. Voted on Scottish
independence, of
and
course.
it was something like 51 to 49.
Yeah.
And it was the most peaceful experience possible.
Beautiful.
49% lost.
And yet they accepted.
It's done. There's no question. 51% of the UK voted for Brexit.
And
Scotland had to go along with it, even though it was something like overwhelming majority of Scotland wanted to stay in the EU.
Of course.
And there's often talk about how to make it happen, but that's talk. And I appreciate that. Even Quebec, its nationalism is mitigated when they lose.
Of course.
They simply will not become an independent.
But that democracy is the dictatorship of the majority, of the 51%. This is what it is. Which means when you apply that to a multicultural landscape, you have a dictatorship along sectarian lines. And this is exactly the problem. That's why you need to go back to principle number one.
I appreciate that local referendums make sense.
But local referendums are open to all residents, irrespective of which cantonal citizenship they belong to.
Sure, yes.
So that's the beauty of it.
And
because I'm paying taxes.
Sure.
So I live in Tripoli. Yes. I'm paying taxes in Tripoli, but I'm not happy with that decision.
Right. Even in Scotland, I remember non-British residents could vote because they simply lived there.
Of course.
I was a student. I had the right to determine the future of Scotland, which I thought was so. I thought it was unfair. It's like, you don't want me to. Maybe. But they insist on it. They're like, no, if you live here, you're part of it.
You have to. So
I can subscribe to fully.
So it ties nicely with the fact that I need to mention that there are 3 layers of governance. I don't know if we're talking about that. The municipal residency, so where you reside and where you pay your taxes, and obviously you can reside wherever you want. You just abide by local law, and you vote wherever you reside, irrespective of your citizenship. Citizenship is a cantonal concept, so it goes back to whether you're Sunni, Shia, Druze, or Christian, and you're a national, so you have the Lebanese passport. So 3 layers of
it's not the other way around, cantonal nationality and Lebanese citizenship?
Very good point. It's debated all over the place, but it's a very good point.
The Sunni citizen? I don't want to be a Sunni citizen.
but wait a second.
I'd rather just...
No, but it's a citizenship as opposed to the nationality. And yes, I would have thought, but it's the semantics here are touchy. You cannot say Sunni or Shia or Druze nationality within one country. It wouldn't work. You understand? So you have to keep the nationality. And that's the ultimate goal, is to have that, as we mentioned, I mean, to move from organic identity to constructed organic. Just to give you 2 examples of philosophers who thought about this. On the one hand, you have the likes of, as I mentioned, Fichte and Schmidt, those who thought of the organic nationality or identity, and the exact opposite. You have the likes of Rousseau, Pfuddendorf, who thought that people are bound together by contract rather than by organic historical identity.
That's true.
So, in order to, Lebanon is a contract. Communities are our identities, organic identities. So to move from this to that, the federal project is that bridge that I think can actually make that. If you look at the Swiss today, they're profoundly nationalistic for Switzerland.
Yes.
Rather than, of course, they are for their own canton, but also they are profoundly attached to that.
You can be on the border and you're still Swiss wholeheartedly. Absolutely, yeah.
So the beauty of that is that it came about because it respected their identities.
But I think there's also something about letting enough diversity within your system of governance to allow for some pluralism which is healthy. I don't know if it needs to be that nationalistic. Let me ask you another question. Principle 9 is the roadmap of 4 nations in Lebanon. Those 4 nations are sects. And I'm assuming they're Maronites, Sunni, Shia, Druze.
Yeah.
That's the 4, yeah. I don't feel Sunni. Do I need to be part of the Sunni nation?
Very good point.
Yeah.
And I have 2 answers for you. It's a great point. First,
am I forced into it?
No, wait a second. I wake up. I feel more Japanese than French. Say I'm Pierre Lecoq, okay? I feel sorry for you. That's sort of the. But wait a second. I can become French. I'm Lebanese. I'm not French, but I can become French.
Yeah.
Anybody can simply. It's not. You can change your cantonal citizenship. Just to give you an example, in Switzerland, if say a Jurassien wants to become a Vaudois, there's a process.
Yeah.
But he can. Here, the same. People, it's what you believe in, and you will see it in the Constitution, however you read it, doesn't matter. Nobody is there to question you. Are you a believer in that faith? Or nobody cares. Nobody cares. Once there's a citizenship,
I live in a Sunni nation in a canton that's predominantly Sunni, and I'm not a fan of any of the Sunnis that are trying to govern. There's a Greek Orthodox guy or a Shia woman that I think is far more competent. Is she allowed to govern my canton?
Of course not.
Right. That's my problem with this whole thing.
But wait a second. Wait a second.
Wait a second. I like that. Of course not.
No. But wait a second.
Yes.
Would that person you want to hand over? Well, that person can become a citizen, and people can vote that person into power. Nothing by law prohibits that. The question is, will you make the necessary administrative steps to make it happen?
So that's where citizenship becomes the
Absolutely.
right.
I mean, if the citizen, I don't care whether the citizen is a Buddhist, a Sunni, Shi'i, Christian. In my canton, I don't care. If people vote him into power, he's a citizen.
Right.
And people vote him into power.
That's why nationality and citizenship are the. I see.
Donc, it doesn't matter. Look at I don't know. To give you 2 examples.
Yeah.
The first one is Henri IV. Henri IV, by the time he wanted to become king of France, and he has this famous say, Paris vaut bien une messe. He was Protestant. Paris vaut bien une messe, meaning Paris is worth a mass.
Yes. Yeah.
Meaning it's worth it for me to convert to Catholicism, which he did, to become king.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of the aspect of who governs who. You want to be like the ones you govern. The other example is, look at France. If I don't know, if Zemmour becomes president, he's a Jew, and he says it outright. I'm a Jew. Nobody cares. He's a citizen. Nobody cares what he believes or he does not believe. He fits into the national. He super fits in the national narrative. That's a different topic. But
that's what. Okay, let me think. Let me try to understand.
Barack Hussein Obama. Okay, did anyone care whether he was religiously? I mean, agnostic, atheist, Muslim, or Christian? Nobody cares. He's profoundly attached to the United States.
Right, but let me try to understand this more. Eric Zemmour is an Algerian Berberi Jew who's a French citizen first and foremost.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Right. Is that, and he doesn't appeal to me. I think he may appeal to.
He does appeal to me.
He does appeal to you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that kind of this Puritan way of looking at citizenship, and it's almost an absolutist way of saying you have to be one of us, otherwise you're not welcome. I don't like that kind of forced identity on those that are not as rigid.
I agree. Wait a second. Okay, that's a big topic, and it's a, I don't know if I call it a topic. It takes us back to a fundamental question. What do we want? I mean, fundamentally as human beings, and in our social construct, and what is politics for? And I'm gonna try to answer this. What do we want? We want to live in peace and harmony and prosperity. That's what we, I think, all want.
Yeah.
What is politics for? Politics is the mechanism that would fend off the inevitable. It's designed to avoid conflicts.
Of course.
That's its sole purpose, is to make sure that tomorrow is not hell.
Sure.
Tomorrow
That's
is
true.
ideally heaven, but we're not that ambitious.
No, that's well said.
Let's try to avoid the war.
Sure.
Okay, so it's not politically correct to say it, but the way you address those two matters, meaning build a functioning society and design systems that lower touch point, friction points, is by federating like-minded and empowering them to take hold of their destiny. This is what made European secularism, accountability, governance systems is cuius regio, eius religio. This is it. Otherwise, it's eternal sectarian bickering.
Let's go to the roadmap then. How can you best explain this path forward for Lebanon given its current impasse, without looking at the issues that we talked about? Sovereignty discounted, neutrality not a state-led thing, but more a natural thing that doesn't exist right now. How do you get Lebanon from where it is into a federal state?
It will not.
It will not. So, I didn't expect.
I'm a pessimist. It's over.
Oh.
Civilizations die. It takes time. You don't feel it. It's not like between a day and the other. But then, just if you look at it take the long view, and you know that something is over. Lebanon is over, and I think the raison d'être of the country is no more. Back in the 19th century, 20th century even, we were able collectively to locally and globally find become a value add in the global economy. I mean, there was the Arabian region coming about, there was Europe, and we find a smart, nice way to fit ourselves within that and add value actually to the system. That is no more. If you look at Dubai, it's light years away from us. I mean, they don't need, they just laugh at us, okay? Rightly so, because they made it big time. These guys are smart. They have built a state and built a system and positioned themselves in a way that they have become totally meaningful to the global order.
Yeah.
and we have become totally moot, irrelevant. We don't have a raison d'être. We don't have a raison d'être. Talking in the global order of things. Whether we exist or not, nobody will feel the difference. We don't add value to the system globally. So that's over. Internally, the dominating clash is between the Sunni and the Shia. It's been there for 1,400 years. That clash is taking over Lebanon because of demographics, because of the weakening of the Christians. So we're no longer a key player in that equation, which means that we're going to become another Syria or an offshoot of those struggles that agitate the region, let alone the fact that the mountain suddenly is no longer a refuge because the world is flat. Technology has rendered that safe haven, that safe place, and that's the first time ever. It's no longer somewhere you can go to and say, you know what, I'm protected here. It doesn't make sense. The world, technology has made this totally irrelevant. So all of these matters, and from my perspective, the acceptance, the acceptance of the derooting of Christianity, especially its linkage to Arabism, ended its historical strength, and made its slow decay totally unavoidable. So all these factors come together would probably result in a country that will, I think, soon be no more, because it doesn't make sense for it to be. It will remain maybe a legal country, but it will not be a real country, between this distinction between legal and real.
I see the same trajectory. What I will only touch on in what I think of as a valuable disagreement here is that I don't think it's a 1,400-year problem. I think Hezbollah in Lebanon is not Shia. I think the Syrians in Lebanon was not Sunnah wala Fatah. I think the worst Christian attacks in this country's history are not a reflection of Christianity. And that's why I think even though the path is extremely bleak, and I see the end happening the way you're describing it, that the borders will probably never change, but the experiment or the ideas will fade and die, if they haven't already. Which is why I go back to the initial sort of point of disagreement, is that federalism is fine. It's a mode of governance, and if it fits well for Lebanon, fantastic. You can't be anti-federalism. That simply doesn't make sense. You can debate its merits, you can say whether or not it applies here or there. It may work better in other places, it may work better here, but that's a point of constructive debate. But federalism, for it to flourish, I think would have to go back. We would have to go back to what your father, and I think my father too, the reasons why they loved this country. It's not for what they died in or what they're living in right now, this mess. It's what they remembered from their earlier years. The younger independent Lebanon that never really took off. And for me, that is the only example where you had something that was functional enough to get us to a better place later. But over time, maybe that is also just, you can't go back in time.
If ever we want to, there's a narrow path to salvation. And I would put it that way. Greater Lebanon, decided in 1926, is dead. It's over. We need to design something new. And it can only be by consensus. Okay, people have to buy in. That's something new. My feeling is that the narrow path that we have to a federal system is the following. First, that collapse is at some point, I hope, this is wishful thinking a bit, some president of some country is going to invite those four morons here. Say, you know what, guys, please come over. The hotel is paid. Women are available. Just sit and discuss this topic, okay? So they go there, one of this, one of this, one of that, one of that, you know, the four guys. And they look each other in the eye and say, you know what, I mean, we've done enough damage, right? I mean, people's lives are shattered, the savings are gone, we stole everything we can steal. Okay, it's a mess, right? Let's agree it's a mess. What can we do to eventually build something to our kids, to the future generations, etc.? They're gonna debate, okay, and they're gonna, okay. If they are, how to say it, if their intents are pure, and it's a big if maybe they could be threatened by, we can give them immunity if ever they come back with something of sense. So that's something. They will trade the good governance constitution for their personal and their guys' misdeeds, which is okay. I'm willing to pay that. And I'm for a full pardon of the political elite against a good governance system for my kids. I mean, I don't want to prosecute anybody. So the point is, maybe these guys would accept something that looks like these 10 principles and improve them if they think they have a better model to propose, agree on it, and come and put it to referendum in each of the communities. Say, guys, this is what we have. Is this something you're willing to live with? And it's voted. And if each community votes a buy-in, because somebody will tell you, you know what, I don't want, whatever. But I think it's a good solution to preserve the 10,442 square kilometers.
52,
whatever.
Those 10 are important.
Yeah, I know those. They're the reason why we're in that deep hole. I know.
You understood that.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust me. So because apart from these guys acknowledging that reality and how deep in the hole we are, collectively, individually, I mean, if they don't do that, they're going to perpetuate clashes. And I'm going to talk, I'm going to tell you one thing, and you're going to relate to that, I'm sure. We've educated our kids in a way where they're rooted enough to fight. They can withstand hunger and poverty. But there is something that they are not designed to live with, which is the absence of the rule of law. That is the problem. The migration is mainly driven by this. If there was a war, people would stay and fight. If there was a famine, people would stay and work harder. But the absence of the rule of law, the way the system is currently designed, forces people to migrate. This is the main reason why a flaw or a driver for migration. That's my firm belief. And unless it is immediately stopped, and it cannot be stopped unless you empower people bottom up in a system that is coherent, that gives sense to their lives. Because we're not here by chance, right? Nobody wants to think that I'm here because I'm... No, we want to think, but it's only how to say it, it's egoistic. We want to think that there's a meaning to our lives, and that meaning is only a given sense within the collectivity in which we have been brought up. So that's the identity part of where we're coming from and where we're heading, why our lives make sense, how can we improve on our environment. And I'm gonna finish with it. Take one single example. Our forefathers were poor guys, poor villagers, but when they built their homes, you would say it's designed beautifully. It fits within the scenery like it's a dream house, right? 100 years later, much richer. What do you build?
The ugliest.
The ugliest
place.
concrete
Yeah.
shit you can ever find. How come a poorer guy builds with no architect and no design? Because it all goes back to the meanings of his life. Our forefathers were rooted and thought they were here for 1,000 years. They want to be here for 1,000 years. Now it's all a commercial trade before I leave.
There's something you said about the rule of law that resonates deep inside me. I think most of the people that I love who have left this country for good have been directly impacted by that. I think it's hard to see Hezbollah's impact on Lebanon because you don't encounter it. It's not something that you see on the streets if you're walking around. Most of the country, you could live your whole life in Lebanon and never interact with it directly. It's a much bigger problem that shatters the city, assassinates politicians, puts Lebanon at war regularly, has definitely crippled the system further, and has made the worst people in this country survive, I think, in the ugliest way possible. But rule of law, I completely agree. I think that impacts all of us in fundamental ways. It impacts me every day. And I've done this podcast for years now. I've never heard anyone say it that way, and I appreciate that perspective and those words. I'll wrap it up with something that you're hinting at, and I think it's true. Consensus is what Lebanon is all about. Consensus is what made it wobble. Consensus is what made it stable to a point during the Mutasarrifyate. Consensus is how I think a lot of our civil war was enacted too. And we don't always talk about those years. I think the consensus was there, even while we were fighting. And consensus will if we're ever going to adopt a new form of governance, it'll be built on consensus.
It cannot be otherwise.
In Lebanon's DNA, there's this power sharing and communal history that cannot be discounted. And in that is consensus. So I really respect the long view by someone who's fairly young. You're a little older than me, but you're still in your prime. You're less than 50. You're 49.
Yeah.
It's meaningful. It's also nice to learn a bit about you, your family's history. I would have never expected this to come up, so I appreciate you telling me that. And also, I'm going to say two more things. You were very kind before we started. You mentioned that you watched an episode I shared with you. I released it in late 2019 called Beirut. It's my way of storytelling, and it's just 12 minutes of Martyrs Square. You told me that you enjoyed it, and I'm going to guess you enjoyed it because of its storytelling way of delivering history. I think you're better suited, Iyad, for this than Twitter, because you're very charismatic on this. I could listen to you for hours. We've talked over 2 hours. I could listen to you for another 2 if I really... I mean, I don't think either one of us would survive, but you're
so kind.
Your skill is not Twitter.
Yeah, I've been told that.
It's explaining history, even if there are points that we don't agree on. You have the right voice and the right tone for it. So I think you should do other podcasts. I'm honored. This is the first one you've done. The other thing I wanted to mention, and we talked about this briefly, is that you're old enough to remember this.
Absolutely.
Now, can I ask you, let's wrap it up with this. Why does this train in the early 1990s, you took it from, remind me, which...
Safra to Portemillo.
Safra to Portemillo. So that's a small stretch of the
Yeah,
coast.
of course.
It's the choo-choo train from Daura to Jbeil.
Yeah.
Why does this bring back memories, positive memories for you? It's a slow train. It was very dysfunctional. It took 4 hours to get from Daura to Batroun or Jbeil.
It's probably because for me train is civilization. Train is what actually links the country to, I've read a lot about trains in the 1880 in Lebanon, obviously, Ottoman Empire, etc.
Those massive steeps. I think it was the most steep inclination.
The one that goes to
I forgot now. I did an episode about it and I forgot the name. It's the inclination that's very steep. Yeah.
But this is all about how, and I'm amazed, and it's shocking how a country like ours, back in 1880, had trains, and 100 years later, doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It shows you how civilizations die.
Yeah.
It's a living proof of where we were 100 years ago when we are today. You had trams in Beirut like there's in Geneva.
Yeah.
And I've lived a couple of years in Geneva, and I'm shocked when I see picture of trams in Beirut. How did we let this go? How did we let this gem go?
Yeah.
Trains, trams, public. This is where people commute. A downtown. I mean, if you look at the downtown, my dad used to tell me, a downtown, if it's not made for the commoners, it has no reason to exist. We made a downtown for the elite of the elite of the elite. It is absurd. So this is what put people together, and we let go of this. And I hate myself. I hate this. Whatever happened.
I think that's the thing that I find it difficult to completely let go of. And I think from your passion about everything that we've talked about, even if it is happening, it's still difficult to accept that it's fading away. But with that said, I look forward to maybe doing this later and touching on other things, because I'm sure we could talk about other issues. You're most famous, you're most notorious for federalism, but I sense there's a lot more we can talk.
Anytime, with great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for spending Friday night during a lightning storm with me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for listening and watching. And a friendly reminder to support this podcast by contributing through Patreon or PayPal. All links are in the details box. Until next time, I'm Rani Shatah, and this is the Beirut Banyan. We did it.
Amazing, Amjad.
That was fantastic.
It was, absolutely. But I was expecting more pushback.
Minni? I'm a nice guy.
You are. No, I was expecting you.
No, I wanted to hear you, because I was going to say this at the beginning of the episode, and I didn't. I was going to say, I'm sure you're used to people just shouting on Twitter. No, I want to hear you out once just to understand you. And it's more interesting.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you.